Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. It's the first interview with Rok Koritnik. Rok is a Slovenian astrologer and researcher. I got really interested in his work by reading an article on the divisional charts, where he discusses the similarities between, the Western astrology and Vedic astrology's ideas. So similarities and differences, which is very interesting. But today, Rok, welcome. First of all,
thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I read also that you did a research on 20 horoscopes of Bhakti Yogis. So we're going to talk about that. You're going to present your research a little bit. But first of all, I would like to know, how did you get into astrology? What drove you to the path of the stars?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, everything happened around 17 years ago or so. Me and my girlfriend at that time, now she's my wife, we found out about one great astrologer here in Slovenia. And basically, more or less out of curiosity, we got there and have our charts read by him. And of course we know, okay, it's very nice that, especially if you're interested in, knowing your path or knowing what is this thing that you have to do in life, like sort of your dharma or your duty in this life. And we visited this man who was apparently very intuitive and probably even a little bit of a psychic, because when he opened my horoscope, what he did, he just looked at the diagram, and basically all he had was just, the zodiac, the houses, nothing special, just very basic stuff. And he did modern Western astrology, and he just looked at the horoscope, mumbled the positions of the planets to himself, took a deep breath, and then just in 15 minutes he just started to shoot out, very important and relevant information for me at that time. And most of it is still like sticking with me. It was really, spot on, very much to the core. He didn't, speak about any unnecessary, things that would just clutter everything up, but he really went to the point. And immediately I was like fascinated. Actually, I laughed, during the reading. I was laughing really hard because I just couldn't believe it, that he's pulling out such information out of this round diagram that he's looking at.
Yes.
And of course, I'm quite a curious person, and immediately I was thinking, wow, maybe this would be something I would also want to take a look at, and maybe learn. But at that time I was very much involved with music, so music was my priority. And I actually got into astrology quite a few years later, actually some 7 years ago. At that time I had some severe health problems, and no doctor, no natural healer, nobody was able to solve it. And eventually I took help from astrology because I wanted to know what's going on, maybe astrology has an answer. And at that time I visited one Vedic astrologer, and I was also, during that time I was already involved with Indian or Vedic philosophy through the path of devotion of Bhakti Yoga. And that was probably the point where I really got intrigued by astrology. And then I also made a trip to India and got a reading from one astrologer in India who was in the 33rd generation of astrologers in his family. And that completely blew my mind, but also left some doubt, because I've been used to to knowing my planetary positions from the Western astrology, which at that time I was already getting myself familiar with. But here everything was different, you know. My 4 planets were no longer there in Leo, instead they were in Cancer and so on. So I thought, why the difference? And
Yes.
then I just decided that I will stick to what's familiar to me, and started to learn modern Western astrology through books that were available in our local library. I started to, you know, just explore different charts, do short reading, simple reading for a few of my friends. And then I got some really good feedback, you know, and they encouraged me, yeah, you should do this. So I kept learning Western astrology, but all the time I was also like secretly very drawn to the Vedic astrology, because my philosophical background was Vedic. But I just didn't want to make the switch, you know, to the sidereal zodiac, because one of the first things I wanted to make myself clear about is the dilemma of the zodiacs, you know. So I really wanted to read as much as I could about it, and pretty much settled on the tropical zodiac because I found very satisfactory explanations through the more esoteric teachings.
Yes.
But then one day a friend of mine mentioned that he found a Vedic astrologer, Ernst Wilhelm, who uses tropical zodiac with Vedic techniques. And I said, wow, this has to be interesting. Of course, I Googled it and immediately found him and started to study with him. And the first thing I studied was Tajika system of astrology, which is very similar to the old Western astrology, or say medieval Persian astrology, which is, we could say it's an offshoot of the old Hellenistic astrology. And that actually helped me understand some things that were not quite clear to me in the Western astrology. But I also got interested in Jaimini system.
Yes.
Because I found it so different, and I don't know, I'm a person who likes to look at the different things, you know. Okay, why is it different? What's so special about it? And yes, when I started to use the specific aspects of the signs that are used in Jaimini's system, the astrology began to be very much fun for me. You know, it was such a fun using these aspects, so elegant, so simple, and so effective. And then I decided, okay, I want to learn this also. So now I'm still learning Jaimini. I'm learning from Ernst, and I'm also exploring on my own. But I have to say that it is a very enigmatic system, full of riddles. And but I know I just have to keep on drilling, because many things that are there are so profound that it's
and that's
worthwhile.
That's what you're doing. You are actually researching many techniques and different systems. So looking for a way through. Now, one of the things that you initiated was research on the Bhakti Yogis. You used some Jaimini techniques to make sense of that. And so what is it all about? First of all, what is Bhakti Yoga?
Okay, Bhakti Yoga could be explained in a simple way, like the path of complete surrender to God through love.
Yes.
And in practice, it's like devotional service. So you serve your deity, basically.
How you went about this research? What are the key elements? Because I know you looked at Navamsha charts mainly. Yes.
Right. Yeah, there is this specific technique in Jaimini Sutras, which takes the Atma Karaka. The Atma Karaka is the planet that has the highest degrees in a sign, and this planet becomes like a significator of the self, of the soul, we could say. And then this technique goes like this. First, we have to erect a Navamsha chart, which means that this is a separate chart with signs in it that is constructed from the Navamsha positions of the planets. So we have to first calculate the positions in the Navamshas. The Navamsha is the ninth division of a sign. So basically we have one sign divided in 9 parts. Alternatively, we could also say that we're dividing the whole circle into 9 parts. So the Navamshas pretty much are seen when we look at the circle. It's like 9 micro zodiacs within a sign. So we're starting from Aries, and then we repeat 9 times the natural sequence of the planets from Aries to Pisces. So they flow in natural order around the zodiac 9 times.
Yes.
And then we calculate the positions. Okay, in this case we're concerned with Venus and Ketu mostly. We calculate the positions and we construct an Navamsha chart. I explained this in detail in my article on the Navamsha on my website, so the listeners can go there and check it. The whole calculation is explained. So basically we can calculate all the Navamsha positions quite easily by hand. It's nothing. It's not very complicated. So when we have this Navamsha chart, Jaimini says to look at the position of the Atma Karaka, and that sign in which the Atma Karaka falls in becomes the Swamsha. And this is the alternative ascendant which we use for these specific techniques from the Swamsha. So we count a different amount of signs from the Swamsha to arrive at a particular place which gives us particular answers. So in this case, for liberation and bhakti, for spiritual matters, Jaimini instructs us to look at the 12th sign from the Swamsha. So from the Swamsha, from this position of Atma Karaka in the Navamsha, we count 12 signs from it. And if the Atma Karaka is in an even sign, then we count in reverse order. That's the rule.
Yes.
So yeah, he says that if Venus and Ketu are conjunct in the 12th from the Swamsha, that it indicates faith in Lakshmi. So Lakshmi Devi is the consort of Lord Vishnu, and her counterpart, more esoteric counterpart, is Sri Radha, which is the consort of Lord Krishna. So here we have Venus emphasized in conjunction with Ketu, which is very interesting, because Venus represents desires and also represents the engagement of the senses.
Yes.
So through Venus, and especially through the sign of Taurus, we are basically growing our roots into this world through the senses. And it makes sense that when we add Ketu, the planet, the Graha, which symbolizes, the internalizing and also the detachment, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so detachment, internalizing, spiritualizing. So we have Venus and Ketu together, and the significations of Venus in this case are being turned around. So turned inward, the person is getting detached from his or her own desires, and everything is getting spiritualized. So it makes sense that for this we're looking, especially for the path of bhakti or devotion, we are looking at Venus and Ketu together, because the path of bhakti is surrender. And what is very common in this path is that the person is attempting to spiritualize their senses and their desires.
Venus is also a Rajasic planet.
Yeah,
so
sure.
it's a passionate planet. So
Yeah.
it seems like not an easy combination in that sense.
Sure. I mean, for worldly things, for worldly expression of love, this combination can be very challenging.
Because that's what Venus actually is strongly representing. It's the senses and so on.
Yeah. Unless she is in Pisces, where she starts to function with her higher nature. More like spiritualized, but especially when with Ketu, and Jaimini says, in Pisces especially. Yes. So that's a special case. When this happens in Pisces, we can be sure that the person is going to achieve liberation through devotion. But yeah, Venus, as I said, is it's actually a very important planet, because this world is run by desires,
Yes.
This is the motor that's pushing this world around. It's desires.
Yes, it's very much connected, if we could say that, to the natural order of things, right? It's also connected to DNA, which is, the spiral form and the hexagon and everything.
Basically, the sticky substances are connected with Venus. And it's interesting because you mentioned hexagon.
Yeah.
And hexagon is the geometric form of Venus.
Yes.
In hexagon we have two equilateral triangles, one turned upside and another turned downside.
Yes.
Together, so we have the union of the opposites. And Venus is basically I call her the great unificator. And it's also interesting that she is the significator of the water element, which also has this role, if you want to bake a cake, you can't do it without water, because the flour just won't stick together. Add water and immediately everything glues together. If you want to play if a child wants to play in the sand and make some like cupcakes or whatever, or castles, the only way you can do it if there is some water added, if the sand is wet. So yeah, Venus binds things together. And it's very important here because she's, of course, Venus is in Greco-Roman tradition is the goddess of love.
Yes.
And we have a lot of this symbolism everywhere,
It's funny because she's also worshipped by demons, right? Referred to as Daitya Puja, which I think is interesting. So I was going to ask you, because we're talking about Venus and that position. Jaimini also gives, Venus in the 12th from the Swamsha, because of course the 12th relates to liberation and elevation. In a malefic sign gives, worshipping low spirits is how we can translate it. And also my other question is, Ketu is of course connected to Ganesh, right? The son of Shiva. And I know also that Jaimini gives for Ketu, a more, a more active path, like a Shiva path, right?
Yeah.
The angry
and
Shiva.
Also,
So I'm wondering about that, because he's talking about the combination between Venus and Ketu. There's some, contradictions there in the sense of Venus represents so many things.
I mean, it's not, because we need to understand that when he says Venus for lowly spirits, people who are performing such practices, that they are worshipping some spirits, they are doing this to fulfill their desires, nothing more. Here there's no devotion. It's just, okay, I do this ritual, I satisfy you, and you do this for me,
Could it also mean, I'm not sure because I didn't do the translation, but is low spirit, could it also connect to nature? Because Venus is, of course, relating to that.
Yeah, I mean, it can relate, sure. Yeah, it can relate to nature spirits also, you know, to like, I don't know, I will now just pull something out of there.
Like elementals and
like, yeah, and also fairies and dwarves and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, okay. Please continue. Yeah.
So when we have Ketu in Venus, you know, first of all, Ketu is spiritualizing the desire. So here we no longer have this, okay, I will worship these, you know, beings who are quickly satisfied and they will fulfill my desires, but the goal is towards, you know, the goal is very elevated, you know, I want to develop, you know, pure love for God.
Yes, absolute surrender and devotion to God.
Right.
Yes, I think in our Western culture, it's a very difficult concept to accept. Indian culture is, of course, steeped in it. There you also have the concept of the guru. Right here, if you utter the word guru, it's oops, you know.
Yeah, the West has, you know, its wounds from Christianity, you know, and also from the, you know, the New Age swamis that came from India and did all kinds of nonsense. So all this is like, yeah, there's a lot of skepticism and also kind of people are slowly becoming very careful about it. But it's nothing new, you know, this path of devotion is not very specific to India at all. Although we could say that it has developed there to a great extent, especially within the Vaishnava tradition in Bengal, which also I could say that for quite a few years I was practicing this path. But we also find this in the later period of the Egyptian culture, in the cult of Isis and Osiris, which really bloomed later in the Greco-Roman period, where the cult of Isis was very much a devotional cult with all the elements that we find in Indian devotional cults. And what is interesting that Isis is often connected to Venus. She is, we will find this unification principle when Osiris gets murdered and you know, his body dismantled by Seth. She finds the lost, scattered pieces of Osiris and glues them, you know, merges them back together.
Glues them, yeah.
Yeah, and brings them back to eternal life. So there's a lot of esoteric symbolism there.
Yes, Venus is Virya also, life, you know, rejuvenating.
Yeah. Venus actually is very important. It can, we could almost say that Venus can make or break a person, because, you know, the desires run our lives. So if we have desires that are, you know, we could say right desires, it will make us, but wrong desires can break us.
Yes, and we also hear that, you know, all the time, that Venus, Rahu, Venus periods.
Yeah,
it can make or break someone. Yeah,
I mean, I've been through my Venus Rahu and it was hell.
It was hell for me. It was also, I've also been through it. It was intense, very intense.
Yeah, it was
good.
I can say that it was the most difficult period of my life.
Wow.
Definitely, yeah, because it was just so many desires to handle, you know. Rahu brings his own, you know, stuff and just amplifies the desires of Venus, and it was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
you know,
disillusion.
I just couldn't believe it that it's possible. You know, I didn't know that I have so many desires.
You want to present your research a little bit?
Okay, so this is my research I did on the Navamsha charts of Bhakti Yogis. It all began when I wrote the article on the Navamsha, and I presented 4 examples to illustrate the technique in the Navamsha presented by Jaimini, which includes Venus and Ketu, as I mentioned before. And then I saw, wow, this is really, you know, repeating, and I wanted to see other charts that I have in my database to see how reliable this technique is, how often it will show up. And while I was doing it, I said, okay, if I'm doing 20 charts, I might as well throw the sidereal calculation in the mix, just to make it more interesting, and we can even compare the results of tropical and sidereal. So here we have on the left side we have tropical Navamsha chart, and on the right side we have sidereal, done with Lahiri Ayanamsha, the standardized. So yeah, the first chart, just to make things a bit clearer, the Atmakaraka is highlighted with the red square, and Venus and Ketu are highlighted with the red circle. And I'm also have these arrows for important aspects. And so in this case we have Sun as the Atmakaraka. It falls in Taurus Navamsha, so this becomes the Swamsha. Taurus is an even sign, so we count in reverse, and our 12th becomes Gemini. Here we have Venus and Ketu conjunct, just as Jaimini says that is required for faith in Lakshmi, or we can say for path of Bhakti, because it's more important than the deity itself is the spiritual path that the deity represents, and Lakshmi Devi is the embodiment of Bhakti.
Yes.
You know, she's just constantly serving Vishnu. So here we have them conjunct, and also they are aspecting the Navamsha Lagna, marked by the two lines, which falls in Pisces, which makes everything even more powerful.
Yes. This is using Rashi aspects, yeah.
Yeah, okay, this we need to make this clear. We are using Jaimini's Rashi aspects, and for this we are using the square, so-called square Indian chart, which enables us to see these Rashi aspects very clearly. And for those of you who are not familiar with these aspects, Google Rashi Drishti or Rashi aspects, and you will find plenty of articles explaining them. And they are really easy to see and very fun to use.
Yes.
So the sidereal chart, the sidereal Navamsha also has Venus and Ketu conjunct. And we should know that the spatial relationship of the planets remains the same, no matter which zodiac we use or which Ayanamsha we use.
Yes.
The spatial relationship, the longitude is the same. So it's very likely that even in the sidereal zodiac, Venus and Ketu will fall in the same Navamsha, so they will be conjunct because their spatial relationship is the same. But here we don't have them in the 12th. The 12th from the Swamsha, in this case, the Swamsha is Gemini, would be Taurus. But
Yes.
they are aspecting Aries. They're not aspecting the 12th. They are aspecting the Lord of the Swamsha, which also tells us something. It's not unimportant, but the indications here are not as strong as in the tropical chart.
Yes. You also have Jupiter there.
Yeah, also
But,
Jupiter is
you're
there,
right.
of course.
Sure.
But it's not textbook perfect, as
Okay.
in the case of the tropical. So the first 4 examples I have here are like textbook examples, just as Jaimini says.
Rok, I also have a question. Did you look at these horoscopes in the Vimsamsha chart? I mean, did you look at these combinations in Vimsamsha, the chart of devotion?
No, here I just focused strictly on Jaimini's instructions.
Guidelines,
yeah. But it would be interesting to see also in other Vargas,
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that the Navamsha geometrically is the division of Ketu, because it's the number 9, and we have the nonagon appearing when we connect all the Navamshas of the same sign. So yeah, it makes sense to look for liberation in the Navamsha. So our second example, we have Cancer Swamsha. Cancer is an even sign, so we count in reverse. and we arrive at Leo, where we have Venus and Ketu conjunct. And we also have the Lord of Leo, the Sun, exalted in the 12th from the Navamsha Lagna, aspecting Ketu in Venus.
Yes, that's very strong.
It's very strong.
Yes.
This is the sidereal version. We have them conjunct. We don't have them in the 12th. Here we have Sagittarius Swamsha, so the 12th becomes Scorpio, but we have them in aspect. They are aspecting, which is also powerful, but not as powerful as being there right in the sign conjunct.
Sure.
Then this one is also powerful because Venus is the ascendant ruler in the main chart, in the Rashi chart. And here we have Jupiter is the Atmakaraka. The Swamsha becomes Aquarius, and the 12th from Swamsha is Capricorn, where we have, again, Venus and Ketu conjunct. And they are aspected by the Navamsha Lagna Lord, which also adds something.
More emphasis, right?
So even the Lagna Lord is, we can say, interested in this.
Yes.
And yeah, of course, Venus as the ascendant ruler is here with Ketu, so it's a powerful spiritualizing thing going on. Sidereal, we have Pisces Swamsha. Mars is the Atmakaraka. And the 12th is Aries. We don't have Venus and Ketu in Aries. We have them conjunct, but they're not aspecting the 12th. They are aspecting Swamsha instead. Again, it's not that it's not powerful. Sure, it talks about it, but it doesn't talk about it in as powerful way, as evident way as the tropical Navamsha. Here's the 4th textbook example. We have Libra Swamsha, Sun is the Atmakaraka, so the 12th from Libra is Virgo, and we have Venus and Ketu here. But in this case, we see that Venus is fallen, it's debilitated in the Navamsha.
Yes.
So this person is not so much like irrational, intuitive, devotional person, but is quite rational, so also has the need to rationalize all the spiritual experiences, to understand it very much through philosophy, and some are of the opinion that, you know, this is a bit of a hindrance on his path, but also in another way it's also a plus, because there comes also understanding and not just sentiment.
Yes.
So yeah, again, a textbook example, Venus and Ketu in the 12th in tropical. I'm also a skeptic a little bit about how much we can use the Navamsha chart as a chart, you know, count all the houses and all the stuff.
Sure.
Or is it more just we should just stick to very specific rules? So this is also what I'm exploring. So here is the tropical version of the 4th chart. We have again Sun, the Atmakaraka, in Pisces, so Pisces is the Swamsha. Aries becomes the 12th. Venus and Ketu are not in the 12th, but are aspecting it.
Yeah.
So it's not as powerful as the tropical, but still, I mean, if I would see this Navamsha, I would still read this from it, because we have the Navamsha Lagna is in Pisces. We have Jupiter there, the Sun. I mean, this already is quite a strong indicator, and then we have Venus and Ketu aspecting the 12th. So yeah, it's not, we could say that maybe they are even equally powerful in a way, but the tropical is more like a textbook example.
Yeah, it shows it more directly.
Yeah, more directly, just as Jaimini wants us to see it.
Yes, because Jaimini is a very clean-cut system.
And this is why I chose this technique, because actually it's performed quite a bit of isolation from the main chart.
Yeah.
And it's very specific, you know, this here gives this.
Yes.
And we can see that it actually works surprisingly well. I mean, I was shocked how accurate it is. And then we have some charts where Venus and Ketu are in aspect, so they are not in the 12th from the Swamsha, but they are aspecting the 12th. Here also the 12th becomes Jaimini, and they are aspecting from Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, I have to say that, I mean, we can look at this one. So here we have them aspecting from Cancer. But we also have Rahu here with the Navamsha Lagna aspecting the 12th. We have Saturn here. So here, in the case of this person, suffering plays a tremendous role and creates his desire to liberate himself from this world, because the person suffers very much.
Yes.
And he's doing this through the path of devotion. And in sidereal, we have Sun as the Atmakaraka, so Swamsha becomes Virgo. 12th from Virgo is, so in reverse, is Libra. We have Venus and Ketu conjunct, but they're not aspecting the 12th. They are aspecting the Atmakaraka and the Swamsha instead. But what we do have, and I see this often, is that we have the Lord of the Swamsha in the 12th from the Swamsha, which again is an important indicator, in my opinion.
Sure.
So these are similar examples. Now we can look at some that have Venus and Ketu conjunct in the main chart. So this is one example. They are conjunct in the 9th house, Cancer, in the main chart. But they are not so obviously connected here in the Navamsha, but because we have a very strong indicator, you know, Venus and Ketu in the house of spirituality, philosophy, religion, in the 9th, that in itself is a very strong indicator. But here we have Ketu with the Navamsha Lagna, so already the theme of liberation and spirituality is there. Also with the moon, and we have Venus with Jupiter in Sagittarius.
Yes.
So at least we have some additional empowerment of what we already see in the main chart. Out of 22 charts that I have in my database of people who are involved in Bhakti Yoga, only 2 of them don't show the indications in this way. These 20 that I have here, they are pretty much spot on all the time, although when we don't have a textbook scenario, we need to look a little bit, you know, to the aspects. And for example, in this case, let me find it. This is a good example. So here we don't have them conjunct in the Navamsha. But Ketu is influencing Venus, is aspecting from Scorpio.
Yes.
And Venus is aspecting the 12th, where we also have Jupiter. So here's the Swamsha, Taurus is the 12th, Venus is aspecting, Ketu is aspecting Venus. So this, it's like a chain of influences that's also very much speaking about the theme that we are discussing, you know, the liberation through devotion, we can say.
Yes.
And also we have the Navamsha Lagna Lord, and the Navamsha Lagna is in Sagittarius. So here we have Jupiter, which is also receiving this.
And in the Rashi chart, you remember the Rashi chart of this chart didn't have the combination?
No, didn't. But all of these charts, I have to say, they have already there in the Rashi charts. There are quite strong indicators for spirituality in general. You know, usually at least one of the occult houses is activated quite a bit, and the 9th house, And often we also see the 12th Lord in the 8th house, which is
Yes.
a powerful combination for deep spirituality. So, yeah, I mean, but if you just look at the main chart, you don't really immediately see, you know, the nature of their spiritual path. But when you look at the Navamsha and use this technique of Jaimini, it becomes quite clear that we're dealing with the path of bhakti. So yeah, I mean, there are many examples. Here we have 20, and I would invite everyone to visit my webpage and have
they should. And
my articles there. And this was the last article. It's called Astrology of Devotion, or did Maharishi Jaimini use the Tropical Zodiac? Because this was also my question here. I wanted to see with which zodiac his techniques would perform better. And yeah, my conclusion is that definitely with the Tropical Zodiac, I mean, at least with Tropical Zodiac we have 4, or we could say even 6 textbook examples with textbook accuracy. But with the sidereal, we don't have even one.
We both use a translation of the Jaimini's Upadesa Sutras by Ernst Wilhelm, right? And of course, then people who are into the sidereal zodiac will probably lean towards Ken Rao, for example, who developed many techniques, Rashi based stuff. So I guess it depends on the techniques one uses to verify these 2 different systems, and I think it's worthwhile investigating both. I know we talked before, and you mentioned that I even still try things out sidereally, even if I'm convinced of Tropical Zodiac, and I share the same opinion. And,
yeah, sure. I mean, why would be so cemented in one belief? Because many times I say to myself, what do we know? But
absolutely.
Currently I am quite very much convinced that yes, the Tropical Zodiac is the one to be used for natal readings. But yeah, just for the sake of research, I'm often checking things with sidereal too.
Thank you, Rok, for sharing your research.
Thanks for the invitation.
You're very welcome. What are your plans? Are you doing more charts? You're going to do more charts? You're going to do some other research? What are your plans in the future? Courses, and where people can reach you and everything?
I probably have too many plans. Yeah, now I would like to first finish my series on divisional charts. I am writing the whole series of articles where I am exploring the use and the rationale of divisional charts. So now I came up to the Navamsha, and next week I'm doing the Dvadasamsha. Basically I'm doing the Sapta Varga, not the Shodasha Varga, because what we commonly find in Indian classical texts is either the Shad Varga or the Sapta Varga, so 6 Vargas or 7 Vargas, which are Hora, Drekana, Trimsamsha, Saptamsha, Navamsha, and Dvadasamsha. So for Varahamihira, Kalyanavarma, for Yavana Jataka, this was sufficient. So I'm also not, currently I'm not very much interested in diving into the higher number divisional charts above the Dvadasamsha, because I just think, honestly, I'm not fit to do it. I don't feel qualified to do it at this point, because even just regarding the use of these 7 Vargas, there is a lot of confusion. Some people believe that they should be made into separate charts. Some say no, this should not be done. They should only be looked at for dignity, for the placement of planets, in which sign it falls in each division, and to see the ruler, the ruling planet of this particular division, and that's it. And yes, actually this is what we find in the classical texts. But Jaimini, on the other hand, is an exception. And his text is the only text where we find this, I will not say a definite instruction, but a hint towards using these divisions as charts. So I'm going in great depth, I think, in these articles, because I want to clarify this matter for myself also. And yeah, you are all invited to read them and leave some feedback. I would be glad to hear.
That's great. You know, I think I changed because I also started sidereal. I think that the Jaimini Rashi Dashas also are very revealing. I also did some research on my own, looking at it from both tropical and sidereal, and at a certain point it clicks, and then it makes a lot more sense, I think. But I'm very curious about your research on the divisional charts as well. Of course, there's a lot of ideas. The world of astrology is insanely vast. You know, if you only look at the literature available, then we have these old texts which are like Jaimini Sutras is coded Sanskrit. I mean, even the translations, even you know, how are you going to translate certain words, and then it's a very complex matter. So a lot of research is needed. So I think it's brave also that we have people really involved in really systematically researching all these things, right? And you're not getting money for it. So, you know, that's also one of the things. Yeah.
At this point, I would also like to mention because maybe some of the viewers might have some idea where to get this. There are texts called Vrida Karikas, which supposedly contain many keys to understanding Jaimini's sutras. And if someone knows where to get them, I've heard that there is already an English translation done, but it is in manuscript form. If anyone has them or know where to get them, I would be very happy for any information. Thank you.
I hope to see you very soon with some more in-depth explanations. Thank you for being here.